Buonasera a tutti. It's a pleasure to be here again. It's wonderful to see so many familiar faces, and it is really my pleasure to speak with Leo Vardiashvili, right, about his book. In the English, the title is Hard by a Great Forest. The front of the cover says it is gripping, thrilling, and blackly humorous, and I can fully attest to this. The book is both poignant and compelling, and it reads like a detective story in some ways and has so much heart, and the humor in it is unflinching, quite dark, but also full of warmth in many ways. Leo, I wondered if we can begin this conversation with you providing us a very brief overview of the novel, and then I will jump in with some questions and we'll have a conversation.
Of course, yeah. Thank you, first of all, for making it through the entire novel. I appreciate that.
It was easy.
It's an honor to be here, by the way. This is my second time in Florence. And
Is this on?
is it on? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Better, yeah. It's an honor to be here, is what I wanted to say. And I'll jump in and kind of set up the premise of the novel. So the novel is about a Georgian immigrant family living in the UK. It's a father and two sons. Their mother gets left behind in Georgia, which is something you'll find out why on the first page. So it's not really a spoiler. But essentially, 20 years go by before the father decides to mysteriously return to Georgia. We don't know why or for how long. So, of course, he goes missing in Georgia. He leaves a mysterious message saying, "Please don't follow me. Danger."
But of course, the sons decide to follow him.
Yep.
And this begins this huge adventure story that is also about language, about fairy tales, about family, about betrayal, and return, what it means to return home after so many years. I wanted to start off with talking about the way that the novel begins, which I found quite interesting. We begin with this city in Georgia, Tbilisi,
Yep.
and there has been a flood, and that flood has released animals from the zoo. So there are these wild animals that are roaming the city as these two sons have arrived, actually Saba, one of them, trying to find their father. And I was really curious about the beginning of this, because to think of a flood that doesn't that might cause some catastrophe in a city, my first thought of this was something biblical. It was this huge disaster that strikes just as these sons are coming here to try to find their father. Can you talk a little bit about how you began this book? Maybe your ideas, your thoughts in beginning this way, but I'm also very curious to learn about how the story came to you.
Sure. I often get asked how much of the novel is autobiographical, and the beginning of it is in that Saba, the main character, goes back to Georgia. I mean, I forced him to go back to Georgia. I went back willingly, but the essence is the same. It's kind of been 15, 20 years since they've returned home. And so that part is autobiographical. So when I went back home, I think it was 2010, it had been 16 years since I'd been home. So I hadn't seen my family, I hadn't seen anything to do with Georgia for that time. And the emotional impact of landing in Tbilisi was, first of all, a complete surprise to me. I had no idea I would remember anything. I left when I was 12. So I thought I would have forgotten everything, but that wasn't the case. I was in trouble as soon as I got off the airplane. I thought, yeah, I'm in trouble now. So that's essentially what the main character goes through as well. But that experience is what made me start writing the novel. The most surreal part of the novel, the zoo animals running around the city, so the tiger hiding up in the mountains, That was all just gifted to me, I'm afraid. There's no big mystery that happened for real.
Oh, that's very nice.
So if you Google Tbilisi zoo escape, something to that effect, 2015, there was a big flood. The zoo got damaged, and literally the entire zoo animals got emptied into the city. So that was a perfect backdrop to kind of have this danger lurking in the city, while the main character is also trying to deal with his missing father, his missing brother, the police are for some reason chasing him.
Yeah.
So it was kind of gifted to me.
It's interesting that you talked about that you mentioned your own arrival into Tbilisi and how the memories started coming back. You know, you're surprised that you remembered so much. And one of the things that struck me while reading the book is how this is a story as much about the city, maybe, about its geographies, as it is about these two brothers, you know, trying to find this missing father and discovering secrets about their family. And I wondered if you could talk a bit about how you developed maybe the geography of the city. I'm really curious as a writer about the process. Did you remember certain things? Or did you go back to tour to find out more about the area? Because the city felt alive in here.
Yeah, that was very much intentional. I mean, where the action starts is the district of Sololaki, which is, it claims to be the oldest. So let's say it's one of the oldest districts in Tbilisi before I start any fights in Georgia. It's one of the oldest districts. That's where I grew up. It's definitely worth at least searching Google for some pictures of it. It looks incredible. These kind of faded pastel houses that were built sort of a century ago, now crumbling and falling apart. It's always full of tourists with cameras because it's just that kind of place. So that was immediately on my memory. I could describe that.
Yeah.
Everything else around the city, I made sure to actually go there. And look, I love Tbilisi. Each tiny little district has its own flavor. Whether it's because of the kind of people that live there or the mix of cultures. You can notice crossing a border. I think in the novel there's a bit where I think invent portals, so magical realism coming into play there. But it really does feel like crossing a border from one part of the city into another.
What I was struck by is also how many different kinds of histories seem to be layered there. So this is a city, much the way many cities across Italy are. This is a city with layers of histories and stories, and I would imagine conflicting stories and histories and peoples. And was that something that you were working on drawing out in the novel?
Absolutely, yes. So I had to rediscover Tbilisi as an adult. So I left when I was 12, but I wasn't really aware of these layers. But Tbilisi and Georgia at large has been invaded over 30 times. So Tbilisi is kind of literally 30 layers of history right there. And on top of that, now you have your touchscreen, bank machines and advertising. So that modernity is on top of that as well, which makes it a really bizarre mix. I saw a medieval kind of the city wall has bank machines installed in it, which is insane. But I wanted to draw that out in the novel and bring it to life as much as I could.
Yeah. We have these brothers who have gone back to Tbilisi to look for their father. Their father has disappeared. The police are looking for him. And so somehow the older brother, Sandro, is trying to relate to Saba, the main character, the clues that he is finding, or trying to find, the clues he thinks he's finding to track down his father, without letting the police in on what's happening, correct? So there's layers of information here.
You're making it sound very interesting.
Really? It really is interesting. So the brother Sandro is leaving clues to Saba so that Saba can follow these trails, right, as the brother is looking for it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So this is probably a good time to mention the title of the novel. So
That's it.
Hard by a Great Forest are the opening words of the Hansel and Gretel fairy tale. And all the translations follow that same format. They take the first sentence from the Grimm brothers fairy tale. And if you remember, which is something I wanted to convey just through the title, is that the breadcrumbs in the forest, they don't work out. They get eaten by birds. So I wanted to convey that message. I'm not sure how well that works, but that's the message I wanted to convey. So that's the title explained. As for the language that the brothers share, that's something from my own life. So me and my brother found ourselves in London, not speaking any English at all. So what we had to make do with was this kind of weird mixture of new English words that we picked up from school, Georgian words, and Russian words. So it became this kind of language that no one but us could understand. So I thought I'd use that in the novel. So when the older brother lands in Georgia and also disappears, he manages to leave this trail that he knows only his brother will be able to follow. So that's the idea. That's kind of rooted in my own life and my relationship with my brother.
Yeah, I'd like to talk a little bit more about this language, because in one way it might be taken from your own life, but there is something really interesting here about the way that language can carry several kinds of meanings, the way that language can make complete sense to someone and be indecipherable to the other person. So you have the two brothers, and you have the older brother, Sandro, leaving these coded messages for Saba to follow. And then there's also, I was struck in the book, particularly, it was really moving, this moment with one of the other relatively minor characters, Anzor, and his wife. And there's a reference in the book about this man's wife who has what is supposed to be routine surgery, but somehow comes out of the surgery with damage to her brain, which scrambles her words. And I wondered if there's something here that I believe you are examining about language and meaning, maybe, or maybe decoding certain things that I'd love to hear you talk about.
I think through the novel, I'm wrestling with this idea of meaning versus reason. And not to give anything away, it doesn't really, but that's the main theme, and that's how the novel ends. What is meaning and what is reason? So the reason something happened could be something very mundane, but what's the meaning behind that? Is there any meaning? Yeah. So what used to scare me, it still does scare me when I see wars on the news, is that a lot of people die without any kind of meaning. It's just a random shell that landed in the house. So that's what I mean. The reason is the shell landed there, but what's the meaning of this? Why? And struggling with that is what I wanted to get on the page. There's a weird thing that happens with, well, there's how many wars are going on at the moment, but you hear casualty figures, and the higher those casualty figures are, the less I can wrap my head around them. I don't understand what they mean. So I was trying to convey what that means to a family, to one person and their immediate family, and how that trickles down from generation to generation. I mean, Georgia was in Soviet Union for 70 years. It's been 30 plus years since then, and we're still hungover from, well, hangover might be the wrong word, because that implies you had fun yesterday. Yeah. Maybe 70-year coma for Georgia. So we're still recovering from that. It's taken, there's still traces of it in Tbilisi that you can see.
Yeah, that's, hearing you say this also, and in terms of reason versus language maybe, or meaning, I was thinking about our conversation we were just having a little while ago today, when you told me about the original title that you had for the book. I'd like you to say the name in Georgian, but in English it's Kaleidoscope, right? I think?
So yeah, it's a play on the word kaleidoscope.
Okay.
And it goes kaleidoskoupi.
Okay.
And scoopy in Georgian means like a jaunty hop. That's how you jump over a puddle. You do a scoopy. So
Yeah.
it's a play on the word, and it was the title of the manuscript pages that are left for Saba as clues. So some of the breadcrumbs. And that was the title all the way up until 1 week before I sent this novel out. Yeah.
It's interesting to think of that this kind of a kaleidoscope that's constantly collapsing one image, one picture, and you turn and another one seems to constantly, comes up in its place, and there's this constant movement, and I thought was interesting.
I have so many rejection letters from agents telling me I'm trying to do too much, but that's the reason I called it Kaleidoscope in the first place, because there was quite a few elements. I mean, the main character is hearing voices. Mm-hmm. He's not crazy, he's just hearing the voices of the people he left behind in Georgia. Yeah. There's the mystery of, are they going to find the father? Are they not going to find the father? Then why are the police chasing them? Yeah. So there's all these elements, and I thought Kaleidoscope seems like a right idea, but a lot of agents thought it was trying to spin too many plates.
You mentioned memories just a little while ago, and what I thought was really, really fascinating here is the way that the past dominates the book, but it dominates Saba's life, the main character. There are ghosts. There are voices of the past, of people who have died, who speak to him as if they were there. You know, he carries on conversation with them. And there is a way that you are, you've made the living and the dead exist on the same plane. And I wondered if you could talk more about that.
This is behind the scenes peek here, but there are versions of the novel where there are no voices. And it reads much worse because these people don't have a voice. It's just descriptions of these people that Saba loves. Yeah. Giving them voices changed the novel completely. And like you said, they put the living and the dead on the same plane. And I'll add, it's not really a spoiler, but the voices, some of the voices have their own intentions. So they're not just voices that he's hearing. They are actively trying to steer him towards danger or away from danger. Mm-hmm. Some of them seem to have actual direct power over him. Yeah. So I guess I was trying to say that your past, the people that have passed away, are still very much part of your life. And sometimes you might hear their voice. I'm hearing my grandma's voice right now saying, "Don't mess anything up." There's people watching.
It was... and you're right, hearing you say they do have some kind of control over the present and over those people who are living. But part of what Saba is hearing, in addition to the voices of people who have died that he has loved, in a sense, those voices also tap into his own guilt about the past. And I thought that you handled questions of betrayal in a really complicated way here. I'm not giving away the end here, but there are moments of betrayal or revelations of betrayal where I said, oh, wow, I don't know if this person should have done this, but here we go, we're in this book. And I thought it was the most honest way to deal with it. And I wondered if you could talk about your sense of how maybe loyalty and betrayal exist in the novel.
I feel like loyalty and betrayal are not absolutes. There's varying levels of them and degrees of them. Good people do bad things sometimes, for good reason or for bad reason. Life is not as neat as this is bad, this is betrayal. And that's kind of what I wanted to express through this, is that you might be betrayed by someone very close to you, but they might have had very good reasons for doing so. And we've mentioned the police interest in Saba's return. My favorite part, and it's no one else's favorite part in the novel, but my favorite part was giving the detective that's chasing Saba a reason, a real human reason for why he's doing this. Because otherwise he felt like a kind of empty plot device. He was just the bad guy. And I was celebrating on my own when I figured out why he was doing this.
Wow. I'd like to talk about Nodar and his wife. If you could talk a bit about them, because he is at the heart of this novel. Yeah, and there is a tension and a real loss that he and his wife have to deal with. Maybe you can talk about how you created them. And
I keep being asked when there's going to be a sequel about Nodar.
Yeah.
There isn't going to be one, I don't think. But Nodar, he's got a few functions. First of all, he's amalgamation of all the taxi drivers I've experienced in Tbilisi. And I think that's the right word, experienced, because it is an experience in Tbilisi to get in a taxi. Last time I was there, I offended the taxi driver by putting my seatbelt on. He kind of looked at me and said, "You don't trust me?" So he's comic relief sometimes. He's the one making the jokes that no one else can, right? Yeah. But also he has his own person that he's trying to find. And again, I don't think this is much of a spoiler. He's missing a family member that was left behind in the Georgian-occupied South Ossetia. So that's the other conflict that's going on in the background of this novel, which was 2008, Russia took a chunk of Georgia, South Ossetia.
Mm-hmm. And can we talk a little bit, I mean, this idea of borders, of these enforced borders, Russia taking a part of Georgia, and all of a sudden, families are separated. People have to flee. And of course, there are some who refuse to leave their homes. And that's also part of the framing of this. There is something as surreal as these escaped zoo animals are, the tiger that is roaming around. As surreal as that is, for me it felt like the idea of the borders that are dividing people felt as surreal as that. It felt almost to me like, what do you mean you're just going to divide this place? And there are still tensions that exist now. But I wondered if, I'd love to hear you talk about how you developed part of the political framework of this without getting too much into it.
Well, here's something surreal. In doing my research, I went to the border of South Ossetia. I mean, you're not allowed to go into South, well, you can try, but it's not very wise to do so. There's sketchy, non-uniformed soldiers patrolling the borders, and you don't know who they are or what they're doing there, so people get disappeared and kidnapped and that sort of thing. But there's a farmer that lives right on the border, and his running joke is that he sleeps with his head in Russia and his feet in Georgia, because his house is literally split, and his fences that kind of, enclose his land are constantly moving. So he says, let's go outside this morning and see where my land ends, because apparently the Russian soldiers will move it forward sometimes, and then he'll go back and put it back. So that's just bizarre that this arbitrary thing called a border is behaving this way and kind of ruining this guy's life.
This is, for me, it emphasizes the way that the atmosphere of this book is really, it's permeated with its memory. It's one layer after another of, I remember how this was and now it's this way, and being able to see both, both of these through these divides. It's really wonderfully done. I'm going to come back to Nodar again, because I think that one of the things that is most striking about him is his brilliant gift of swearing. And he can put the word fuck in many different variations. And at some point I was reading this, and it sounded real. It really sounded real, but I said, how does a writer think of all these different ways of saying this? But could you talk about that? That is a linguistic choice also, I think.
With swearing.
Him. Yeah, because
Yes.
it was done quite well.
It's quite fun to research that part of the novel. It's just sitting around trying to think of great ways to swear. I can share my favorite if you like.
Yeah, please.
Am I allowed to swear?
Sure, yeah.
At one point, I think Nodar is upset with the detective. And I'm not sure why this came to me. And he goes, I ought to go and shit in his oven. And I thought that's such a powerful, smelly image. It's got to be That's good. It's not a real Georgian saying or a way of swearing. It's not. I made that up. But the American editors, oddly enough, took issue with the amount of swearing in the novel. And this was during a Zoom call in the COVID days, I suppose. They sat me down and said, look, just open your document and search the word fuck and see how many hits you get. And I did. It was like 300. And I thought, oh my God. But
they're all used well.
And we defended them, to be honest. We kept almost all of them.
Yeah.
And the reason was that I wanted to portray the Georgian people very well. Mm-hmm. And Georgian people don't have a problem swearing. Depending on which region you're in, sometimes some regions use it as a comma. Other regions don't swear at all, which is quite a weird thing. But they swear so creatively that I'm in fits of giggling whenever I'm in Kakheti, which is like the eastern part of Georgia, where all the wine is made. It's incredible the kind of swearing they come up with. No, definitely not. It's very mother-based. Yeah. I won't say any more than that.
Beatrice wants to know the sound of it.
Are there any Georgians here? No, Sheni Dedamotra.
Okay, there we go. I heard the word mutter.
Yeah, okay. My grandma's not happy with me now.
What was it like to... were your characters speaking in Georgian in your head as you were writing in English? How did that work for you, the translation?
Yeah, I tried to translate a lot of the Georgian isms, let's call them that, just directly. Okay. There's one central one that I'd like to mention, which is a guest is a gift from God, which is a Georgian proverb. And I spent so long trying to translate that into English. It's so much more elegant in Georgian. It's just 2 words, Stumarichtisa, and it just means guest of God. And it's kind of a national mantra. So, especially if you're a foreigner coming to Georgia, people will just welcome you into their homes, give you their best wine, feed you endlessly. And if you've got several stops, like I sometimes do, you end up having 6 dinners in one day, and it's just too much. But that's the Georgianness I wanted to portray.
That's wonderful. And this, your book has been translated in Italian, obviously. Did you get questions from the translator on anything? I'm curious about how they translated the swear words. The Italians can let us know once you read the book. But were there any questions that came up?
There were some general questions, but honestly, I have 0 Italian, unfortunately. So I couldn't give any kind of input. The Georgian version, we worked on for a few months together to make sure that was as good as we could get. Because I'm fluent in Georgian, so I can understand exactly what I was trying to say and how it comes across in Georgian. But it gives me a lot of paranoia, all these languages that I don't speak, that it's been translated to. And especially how the swearing's been handled.
We can let everyone, you can decide that. Let's talk about mothers in here. Not in the swearing type, but in the actual, this is a story about absence. And I wondered if you could give us a bit, I found the heart of this is this mother who is missing, or she's passed away, but she has been missing in her son's lives because she stayed behind so that her children could leave with her husband. It's a heart-rending decision for a family, but especially for a mother. And I wondered if you could talk a bit more about Eka and this thing that she did, but also the function she serves in the novel. Okay, so she's a complex thing to talk about. I mean, the novel opens with the sentence, "Where's Eka?" And when you find out that she's passed away, the family breathes a sigh of relief. It's probably an almost direct quote, because they don't need to wonder if they'll ever be reunited. That kind of trauma is gone. At least they know that she's passed away. They don't have to think about this anymore. It's rooted in my own life. My mum stayed behind, but she then joined us a couple of years later. But that 2 years was enough to feel that emotion.
the most heartbreaking thing about her character is that, so when her husband and the two sons leave, she's kind of left adrift in Tbilisi. And her way of coping is to go, and it still makes me tear up for some reason, she goes to their school as though to pick them up from school. Every day she does this, and the person she's with at the time is like, have you lost your mind? They're not here, they're in London. And her response is, well, it just makes me feel better.
Yeah, that's a really, really powerful part, and it shows you, I think, the way that this book conveys so beautifully that the past is just never, it's never the past. People who are gone and are never gone, and people behave in ways with the dead or the missing as if they were actually there. And that, yeah. To switch gears a bit, I am really curious. Is there something?
No. Let's switch gears. That was a really sad thing to end.
I'm sorry. I'm curious about what you're working on now, without maybe giving away too much about it. But is Georgia a part of this story as well? Or, yeah.
There's only a limited amount of things I can say about what I'm working on. First of all, I don't know if it's going to work. I don't know if it's going to be on the shelves ever, but we'll see. If it can be done, I'll do my best to do it. But it's set 70 years in the past, so that gives you an idea of what time period, what kind of war was during that time.
Yeah.
It does involve a few Georgians kind of mixed up in this great machine of World War II. I've said it now. And yeah, it's a less touched on part of history of World War II is the Eastern Front and the kind of granular detail of what happened there. Yeah. That's all I'm going to say, because it could be a case that you never see it.
Okay. You know, I forgot to mention to you when we had our conversation in the back, a few years ago I was in Georgia, and I was in Tbilisi, and I had a chance to speak with some Georgians about their history, and went to the history museum there. And the thing that struck me is Georgians seem to have been and continue to be, I think, continually fighting for their right to exist in this place where they are. And how did you develop, or how did you draw that out? Because I think you showed that really well in the book, but for me, part of my limited knowledge from just being there was, it's almost impossible to separate Georgia from the efforts and relentless battles to remain Georgia.
If you've been invaded 30 times,
30 times.
You need to be stubborn as a mule to get through that. And I think a lot of Georgians are just, it's just sheer stubbornness. One of my favorite anecdotes in the novel is when the Civil War kicks in 91, so Georgia becomes independent from the Soviet Union. That causes all sorts of chaos, lack of food, that's no electricity. There's a family that decides to use up all their resources, all the food that they have, and throw one giant party. And that's just the stereotypical Georgian way of dealing with it. It's just putting the middle finger up and going, well, I'm going to have a good time tonight, and we'll see what happens tomorrow. And that's actually, my neighbors did that. I was there for the Civil War. My character left, but I was there, and our neighbors literally did that. They threw a whole party for the whole building, and the next day had nothing to eat.
Okay. I was going to wrap it up, but I really have I have one more question based on this, because there is this thread running through the novel of, if you are from this place, you do this. This is how somebody from this place would, of course, react, you know. And I was very interested in, the story moves through, in some ways the story is guided by a series of stories that people tell each other. The clues that Sandro leaves for Saba that are based on stories they used to tell each other. But there's also something here about this mythic figure of what a Georgian might be like, or somebody from Tbilisi might do, as opposed to somebody from somewhere else. And I wondered if you could talk about the way that you developed your characters.
Like I said, to retain our character, even to retain our alphabet in the face of the Soviet occupation, is almost impossible unless you're very stubborn, like we've mentioned, but determined to keep your identity. And that's still playing out today. I mean, they've been demonstrating every day since October when the elections were. They still are. Every night they go out there and demonstrate. And that's the resilience that I wanted to build into my characters. And that's the best way to convey it to the reader directly.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. And I think we will close out with that. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.